This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. And, of course, you can get that on all podcasting platforms. And, of course, their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds as we take a look at the Eagles heading into training camp. We are less than a month now to Eagles training camp. They will begin. Players will report July 23rd. Well, today is June 24th. We are officially inside a month, Geoff Mosher, to training camp. What's up, buddy?
How you doing, Mike? May it be the longest month in the history of months, of time altogether. No, I'm actually excited. I get excited.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a team that it's been all over the place. And one of the big stories this offseason is Kellen Moore, is the new offensive coordinator, and how much of his finger is on this new offense here. Jeremy Fowler, ESPN this weekend, said that Nick Sirianni's putting a large amount of trust in Kellen Moore to handle a lot of things, and I wonder what that exactly means. What does it mean that, hey, I'm going to trust you with the offense here, because I know we're going to look at some of the things that we should be, kind of positive about. You guys talked about on the podcast, but is Kellen Moore's offense one of them?
Absolutely. We did on our podcast about concerns going into the season talk about sort of the potentially volatile mix between two different coaching philosophies, right? And because they're Nick Sirianni comes from the old traditional West Coast tree, and Kellen comes from a more of a spread with a little West Coast that he learned from Mike McCarthy. But it's a little bit there are made some big differences. And but I would think in general, as long as there's harmony and as long as things go according to plans, that one of the benefits of having the offense handed over to one guy, or the offensive coordinator, is that the message will be trickled down from the start, that there won't be any interruptions or interference from other guys doing things. And then the extension of that, Mike, is that I think that if you look at where the Eagles are really strong and what they need to do better at, obviously picking up blitzes is huge and fresher route concepts. But I think they need to get back to using the middle of the field a little more. I think that's where some of the staleness came, not just the route concepts, but the over-reliance on throwing the ball outside the numbers or deep and not using that middle of the field. I do think that if you go back and look, I know that if you go back and look at offenses that Kellen Moore has presided over, middle of the field has been big. Throwing to the running back is big. If you go look at Keenan Allen's receptions last year, I mean, that guy was on pace to catch like a ridiculous number of balls. I mean, he was catching like 8 to 10 balls a game, and he was lining up mostly as an inside receiver in their 11 personnel. He would play outside in 12, but when they went to one tight end, 3 receivers, they would bring the kid they drafted out of TCU would play outside, then Palmer, Trey Palmer, I forget the speedy kid they have, Guyton or Palmer, either one of those on the other outside, and then they would move Keenan Allen in the middle. So there's an opportunity I see here for Kellen to come in and say, all right, maybe I can move Devontae Smith sometimes into the slot and play Paris Campbell outside. He's more of a natural Z Paris Campbell anyway. Maybe, I'll get the tight end influence my offense, and I'll just get the quarterback and the interior receiver on the same page. We've talked about the depth there not being great, but it doesn't mean you can't use any of your top 3 receivers and line them up inside every once in a while to create yards after the catch.
Well, they're talking a lot about motion and some of the other stuff that Dallas Goedert had said. He says, quote, I feel like it'll play in favor of the tight end. The quick game a little bit, getting back to the pivots, the sticks that I caught earlier in my career that went away a little bit. So he's saying a lot of the stuff that he was successful with, they kind of got away from. I wonder how much that has to do with the 2 wide receivers they have. But he said, I'm really excited for how he being Kellen Moore, uses the tight end and how he feels like they can be a big part of the offense and help win games. I think that's another, I know Andrew wrote about that he's, kind of primed for a bounce-back season, but I think we kind of almost forget the weapon that Goddard is and can be.
Yeah, he can be really he can be unlocked in this offense if it's going the right way. Now, the one thing is teams don't just get away because they forget. Like we like to think they do. Like, oh, you forgot to run the ball. Andy Reid never, he must forget. No. The reason why most times teams get away from something is because the opponent has game planned to take it away, and they haven't yet made the counter adjustment. So I don't think that when Dallas says, we got away from it last year, I don't think he means to say like, we probably should have called that play or certain route concepts more. It's just that it wasn't there for them. They've got to figure out a way to make it go, but whether it's using more RPOs again or more quick game or attacking what the defense is now showing them differently to be able to use and exploit different parts of the field. That's the counter adjustment that we always talk about that they have to make now.
We talked about things, reasons, to not be so optimistic when you were here last week, some concerns. But what are some of the things that we should be optimistic about? And are the coordinators, starting with Kellen Moore, part of that?
I think the coordinators are, but I look at the defense, Mike, and, I think it's fair on offense, as we talked about last week, to question just how easy it will be to blend these two different offensive minds and ideologies and get everybody on the same page. Defense, you have zero concerns. I mean, they've already been running a Vic Fangio style defense for a couple of years now. Now you've got the action. You don't have the template. You've got the guy. You got Vic Fangio. You've got a defensive line coach and a secondary defensive backs coach and a safeties coach who all coached under Vic Fangio. So you're not worried about the message being carried out or how it's being articulated in the classrooms. They're all on the same page. The foundation's there. And I think that's a big part of it. And then I think, and we talked about this in the podcast today as far as reasons for encouragement. The Eagles last year finished, I think, 31st in third down defense. I believe they were 30th in red zone defense. We know that they were last in passing touchdowns allowed, or close to last. They were a bottom 3 to 5 team in some really important situational categories. And part of that was the confusion, right, that we all saw last year. But a lot part of it was talent and the fact that, as Greg Cosell would tell us on the show, it was hard to find a secondary last year, or a back seven even, less athletic, less dynamic than the Eagles. Well, you look at it now, and Quinyon Mitchell's going to get on the field. The guy ran a 4.3 40. Cooper DeJean, incredible athlete. He's going to wind up getting on the field for sure. Sidney Brown, very good athlete, has to come back from his injury. He'll get in there on the field. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Mike, sorely missed last year, has a playmaking ability about him that Kevin Byard no longer had when he was with the team last year. So if you take just the fact that you're not going to have James Bradbury, I'm still standing on that ground that James Bradbury is not going to be a part of the team. If you're just taking those three guys that I mentioned, right? CJ Gardner-Johnson, CJ Gardner-Johnson, the two rookies, DeJean and Mitchell, Sidney Brown, Darius Slay still playing at a decent level. And even at linebacker, I'm not sure that's much better, but I will say Devin White's probably is definitely a way better athlete than anybody they had at that position last year. So I do believe, Mike, just naturally upgraded your speed, your quickness, your talent, your dynamic ability there to the point where nobody should think the Eagles are going to be a bottom 5 pass defense or situational pass defense. Now, they may not be top 5, top 10, who knows, but they're not going to be as their current, unless things go south, Mike. I can't imagine them being the embarrassment that they were last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big change, and I know, a lot of people looking at that safety spot, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, are they going to, is that an area where they might look to add something at that one spot there? I know a lot of people looking at Eddie Jackson, Simmons. Do you bring that veteran guy in? Who knows? Because kind of going back to what you said, they have the guy who runs the defense. These are players who have been in that defense, so you can kind of take your time, bring them in later on, and they won't have to go through a full, like Byard last year. He was in 3 different defenses in 3 months.
Yeah, that was rough for him. The Bears certainly ignored that and figured that they would take a shot on him. Gave him, I think, an $8 million a year deal this year. I do think that it's an area that Howie Roseman will look to upgrade, but I believe he, just sensing how he's acted in the past, he's probably going to see how this thing unfolds for a few weeks of camp first. I mean, last year he didn't wait that long, right? Last year a linebacker, after I think like a week of practice, he called up both Zach Cunningham and Miles Jack and said, please please get in here, And then Miles Jack wound up retiring, but Zach Cunningham wound up being one of their better linebackers. But you see how it went long to make that call, and we'll see how long he goes before he might feel the need to do that at safety.
All right, we're looking at some things to be optimistic about. Let's stay on the defensive thought here, and we talked about Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, but the secondary in general, I would think that as a whole, I know Isaiah Rodgers was saying that he thought this was the best room that he's been in so far. People looking at Rodgers. There's so many guys in that room that aren't getting enough, attention because there's just so many of them there. But if you're looking at something to be optimistic about, I guess it's got to be the back end has got to be better than last year.
Well, you would think depth, which has been, first of all, the Eagles have not had two good cornerback starters together at the same time in 20 years, right? Going back to like Lito and Sheldon. So now you've got that. I'm going to go ahead and assume it's going to be Quinyon. I know a lot of people are just loving the idea right now of Isaiah Rodgers and Slay. I still think it's going to be Quinyon Mitchell, but we'll see how competition unfolds there. But Mitchell and Slay, your starters, that means your backups are guys like DeGene or Isaiah Rodgers or Keely Ringo, a fourth-round pick who came on a little bit at the end of the year. That means the Eagles actually have depth at that position. Last year, at this time last year, they were hoping Greedy Williams was going to be like your top veteran outside depth. He didn't even make the team. He didn't even make it through halfway at camp. So it just goes to show that the Eagles have really paid attention, obviously, to that position in the last two off seasons, and they've really tried to turn it over here.
Yeah, there's no question that I would think that there will be a different story, Geoff, in the secondary almost every day at training camp. I would imagine someone different will stand out almost every single day in terms of a corner or a safety, and I don't know how they're going to figure out which guy stays and which guys go.
Yes, that's why Vic Fangio and his merry men are here. That is their decision to make. But remember, training camp's a big fool sometimes, right? Like last year, you come out of training camp, the top backup cornerback outside is Josh Jobe. He had a great camp, really good camp, made the team, he's a good special teams player, and it was like 5 weeks in that Jobe became Eli Ricks, and then 5 to 7 weeks after that, Eli Ricks went to Keely Ringo, right? So training camp can tell you one thing, but the season can tell you a whole other story.
Yeah, there's no question about that, and I know that everybody, there used to be Mr. Lehigh was the wide receiver every year. There was somebody there. I would imagine Mr. Novacare will be some cornerback almost every single day. All right, Mosher, pick out something else to be optimistic about with this team as we get ready for training camp less than a month.
Something else to be optimistic about is, it's funny, we didn't talk about this a lot on the pod, but I think we might have mentioned it, though. I was one of the few people, well, not one of the few, I was among the people who was not a very big fan of the Marcus Mariota signing last year. When it happened, not even just minicamp or just when it happened. I just felt like I had watched a lot of Atlanta games the year before for some reason, and I thought he was not a very good quarterback. I think that there's better upside with Kenny Pickett here. I thought he had a decent camp from all indications. He'll have to. All the quarterbacks struggled a little bit because they're learning a new offense, but I think with this offensive line, which we expect to still be very good, or at least good, Kenny Pickett has a better chance. These weapons, especially that he's got, if he has to play, got a better chance to have some success and reestablish himself, and also to help the Eagles win some games than Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, Mariota obviously didn't work out, didn't play all that much, but having Pickett here, everybody thought that was an interesting move to make for Pickett. They also got Will Greer is here, a guy who knows the offense, and who was the guy they drafted?
West Virginia guy in there, didn't you? You couldn't help yourself.
Who was the guy they drafted last year that they like?
Tanner McKee. So
that'll be something to keep an eye on as well. Let me. Would you say there should be optimism about the running back room?
Yeah, we did talk about what Saquon Barkley can give this offense. I don't think he's going to be a bell cow. I don't think he's going to average like 24 touches a game. But I think, and I credit DeAndre Swift. I thought he did a good job last year. He showed he can actually be a higher volume carrier. He had less receptions than we expected and more carries, and he had a good year. I think Barkley can add a little bit more explosive element, and that's hard to do because DeAndre was pretty explosive himself, but we know what kind of athlete Saquon Barkley is. And because he's on a team, see, I don't buy into the whole, fans love to say, well, he's going to be on a way better offensive line, and so you're going to see a totally different Saquon Barkley. I don't really think that makes as much of a difference as people say it does or want to believe that it does.
Why is that?
Josh Jacobs 2 years ago for the Raiders had almost 2,000. Did he have 2,000 total yards? You have to go back and look at Josh Jacobs' year a couple of years ago with the Raiders.
Well, let me throw a counterpoint to that. Let me throw a counterpoint to you on that, the Jacobs one, which is a good point because the Raiders don't have a great offensive line, but they have more weapons than the Giants do.
2 years ago, the Raiders?
Didn't they have or did Adams just get there this year? Was he there 2 years?
Yeah, no, Adams was just there last year.
Okay.
You'd have to look at the 2022 Raiders with I don't even remember who the quarterback was.
Well, probably Carr.
It was Carr. Carr played 15 games, right? And maybe they did have Adams. 2022? Maybe they did.
Yeah.
Either way.
Adams was there in 2022, yes.
Right, and that's your
Carr
Jacobs at 2053 yard. Right.
Yeah. So my point is, you got Adams.
Hold on. You're feeding into my point. My point is, it's really not about the offensive line. It's about the environment. So I think Barkley having A.J. Brown, to your point, and Devontae Smith, who are going to command a lot of attention, I think he'll see some opportunities to make huge games, like really explosive plays, because there's not going to be like 7 or 8 guys just keying in on him like Giants opponents were. So people like to make it about the offensive line. And I'm just saying that it's more to me about the environment that Saquon Barkley is than the offensive line, because we've seen plenty of good running backs be able to still be good behind bad offensive lines. I mean, if you're a good running back, all you need is your lineman to stalemate and make some space. If you're good, you bust through the hole, you break some tackles. I think Saquon can improve in that area. Vision, breaking tackles, things like that. But there will probably be 5 or 6 times a game because of the defensive attention to everybody else, Goddard, right, Brown, Smith, where he may not have to. He may just run through a crease and get you 25 to 30 yards.
Yeah, the running back thing is tough because Barkley got paid so much money. You're just wondering, what do they have planned for him at that dollar amount?
Yeah, but Mike, to say your question was less about Barkley and more about the running back room. If Barkley, who is frequently injured, gets hurt, it's hard to look and say Kenny Gainwell, Will Shipley, and I don't know, maybe a Ty Davis Price, who I'm intrigued by, or Lou Nichols, or the kid they brought in, whose name I can't remember. They brought in some bigger running backs, but without Saquon Barkley, this room is not going to wow anybody.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Their latest podcast takes a look at reasons for optimism around this team. A lot of it stems around, look, and I agree, by the way. Like, if you said, I addressed this last week. I said the Eagles never came out and addressed what they thought their problems were last year. They didn't have an end-of-year press conference and say, our coordinators were not ready for this, and therefore we replaced them. But by them replacing them, I think that the actions spoke louder than words. And I tend to agree with them that they have upgraded significantly, and that's probably the biggest reason for optimism.
Yeah, I mean, yes. It's more so the pedigrees, the fact that I've been coordinators before. Vic has had a lot of success. Now, you need talent. If you go look at Vic Fangio's record as a play caller, Mike, whether he's been a head coach or a defensive coordinator, he's got like 5 or 6 bottom 10 defenses, along also with top 10 defenses. So the point is, you need talent. These guys aren't miracle workers, but they certainly, if you look at sort of the discombobulation of last year, that should not be an issue this year. Everybody should be on the same page, at least defensively. Offensively, we'll have to see. I'm a little concerned about it, but we'll have to see.
All right, Geoff Mosher, guys, check out the Inside the Birds podcast with reasons for concern, reasons for optimism. You can get that wherever you listen to your podcasts, and don't forget their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds, and you can hear Football at 4 each day on the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. Mosher's back on Wednesday. Adam will be here tomorrow, and our division previews continue with Andrew on Thursday. We'll be looking at the AFC South this week. which is headlined by the Houston Texans, we think anyway. They were supposed to be last place last year. They ended up winning the damn division. All right, Moshe.
Nobody knows anything, Mike.
Nobody knows anything. Moshe, take care, bud.
See ya.
There's Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. You can subscribe and get that wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.